Hello and welcome to our video contemplation of day signature 63. This frequency corresponds to the Three of Hearts, the prime instinct to imagine, and the heart virtue of Catalysis. It is represented by the Angels of Inception and Truth.
So we have the 41st Angel of Inception, who walks the pathway of anticipation to become the embodiment of the supernova. And then we have the 63rd Angel of Truth, who walks the pathway of passion to become the embodiment of reunion.
Oh, yeah.
This is cool because this is another angel that we've had a conversation with.
That's right.
So we have a lot of information to draw from for this contemplation. We have such a clear picture of what this is all about.
Yeah.
I hope we can explain it.
It's wild. I mean, the clear picture it's in there. We can both feel it. We can individually see it. But it's funny because as we've been seeking the words throughout this day to communicate it, it's like we're dancing all around it. It's actually quite difficult to find the words sometimes. But now that we've hit record and we're in this conversational flow with you, we will trust that life will do as it always does and deliver the words to you through us. And we're just going to be excited about everything we see.
Yep.
So before we dive in,
Okay.
cheers.
Cheers.
This is going to be a fun one. Let's begin at the beginning. Three of Hearts. You've met the three before, back in the Wands. The keynotes for the three are
Symphony and stability.
symphony and stability. What we have here is an organized movement that produces functional equilibrium. That's what it is. It's like a stool with three legs. On any surface, it's going to be stable. But this movement of the three, regardless of its placement, is dynamic.
It is.
That equilibrium is alive. It's moving. It's shifting. It's fiery in this way. So even though we're in the element of water in the hearts, this three brings the heat of fire, the dynamism of fire, the explosive nature even of fire into that world. It's kind of fun to note. I'm going to cheat on your list here just real quick.
Please.
To note that the words ancient flame are a perfect match to the frequency of 63. So while it's very much a water element, there's clearly a dynamic force involved. Another little tip would be the pathway of passion.
Yes.
Or perhaps the embodiment of the supernova. You can see how even in these words, there is a lot of vital energy and it is moving. We're feeling that as well. In fact, I would say that a part of the challenge to connect to the words is just the fact that the vision is so large and moving so quickly. It's like, how do you keep up?
Yeah.
We'll find out though.
Yes.
So this is going to be a lot of fun. Bear with us. We'll do our very best. But that's what we're dealing with in the Three of Hearts. Where do you want to go from there?
Well, I think we can talk about the heart virtue of Catalysis here because what we're dealing with is this dynamic energy. We definitely are dealing with a process, like a chemical reaction, sort of a process. But paradoxically, what is interesting about the definition of catalysis if you look it up in the dictionary, it's actually talking about something that is entirely unchanging. It's like this permanent substance, essentially.
The catalyst itself
The catalyst itself is a permanent substance that does not change. So even though we have all this dynamic movement happening, we also have this element that does not change, that is this seed of truth.
It's all happening around a center. Yeah, very interesting. So I think we may have written down the actual definition. I'm going to take a stab at this myself, though.
Okay.
Based on what we've been able to suss out about this, keeping in mind that when we find these words, we know they're right even before we understand what they mean.
Yes.
So we do this digging, we do this investigating, we learn about them over time. This morning was not the first time we've visited the definition of catalysis. We've returned to it a number of times. To the best of our understanding, catalysis is descriptive of a process whereby a certain element is introduced in relationship to everything else in such a way that the relational dynamic of all those different things are improved by that single element. And not only improved, but accelerated. So a catalyst in this context would be an accelerant. But an accelerant in this context of a movement that manages somehow to remain completely unchanged along the way. So whatever it is that's being introduced remains totally impervious to all of the dynamic exchange and relationship that happens as a result of its presence. This process of catalysis is what we have here as a heart virtue. The catalyst itself, I think what we're coming to realize and what we're excited to share with you is something within every one of us. So because of that something within you, because of that catalyst at the center of you, your very presence introduces this heart virtue of, or this process of catalysis, having some great impact on the world around you, which simultaneously improves and accelerates the growth process of that world, even as that seed at the center of you remains totally untarnished, unchanged, and clear as a bell in terms of what it is and what it's doing. That's some kind of magic right there.
It's really cool.
That's alchemy, but it's like finding that philosopher's stone at the heart of it, or that seed at the heart of alchemy itself.
Right.
Okay, so it might be good to still read the actual definition.
Yeah, I'll still read it. So the actual definition of catalysis, if you just Googled it, would be the process of increasing the rate of a chemical reaction by adding a substance called a catalyst, which is not consumed by the reaction and remains unchanged after it.
I think that's very, very significant. If you throw something in a fire to start a fire, it gets consumed by the fire.
Yes.
So whatever we're dealing with here not only accelerates the rate of exchange, it improves the process, but it remains untouched by it, and it never gets consumed by it. I think that is so special.
Yeah.
And it's totally representative of everything we've been led to over the past few days, and everything we arrive at here today.
Yes.
So we're introducing it early on in the conversation because I expect we're going to kind of return to it as we continue to discover things in this conversation.
Yes.
Yeah, perfect. I'm glad we started there.
Yeah. It's kind of like the overarching principle that we want to set the foundation for the rest of what we're going to talk about.
Absolutely. So let's look at the angels. Let's kind of pull together as many of the different elements as we possibly can, and then we'll expand on them through some of the things that we've remembered and recognized over the course of the day. Yeah. First of all, the Angel of Truth. You've already mentioned this. This is a session we've hosted. It's our 4th session with the Angel of Truth, and its presence here today is an invitation to go and study that session. We're explicit about this every time because it's that important. Yesterday, we were working with the Angel of Decision. We actually forgot to mention that too was a session that we have had. That's an angel we've met with. So if you want to play some catch up, you'll actually find that angel and this angel are speaking a very similar language. But I actually kind of skipped back past the 41st angel and jumped to the 63rd.
Yeah, it's okay.
I was too excited about the session. Let's look at the 41st angel of Inception. Walks the pathway of anticipation to become the embodiment of the supernova.
Yes.
And the Angel of Truth walks the pathway of passion to become the embodiment of reunion.
Yeah, I can't help but notice with these two angels, there's a sequence here. You have the Angel of Inception, and that represents a beginning point.
Beginning of something,
Inception means like to
spark.
Yeah. It's like a spark of an idea. And when you start there, you end with the embodiment of the 63rd angel, which is reunion. It kind of ends with this final returning home, this reunion. That's kind of what the Angel of Truth talks about, this idea of following our passion is the way we return home to ourselves.
It says that almost verbatim in its conversation. And so what we find in this process is the development of something, but not the development of something previously undeveloped. It's actually the development of your awareness as you recall something inherent.
We've all heard of this idea of remembering.
That's right.
We're here to remember ourselves.
That's right.
The Angel of Truth talks about this.
Yeah, it does.
But
it refers to it in terms of reunion.
But actually describes it in an interesting way. Remembering.
Yeah.
Like collecting parts of yourself until you remember your truth, the truth of who you are.
Remembering, recollecting. I think it's interesting. It's very much a part of what we find here. The initial moment of inception at the start reminds me of the prime instinct, which is to imagine. The beginning of any movement, the beginning of anything that ultimately becomes experience in real life is imaginal. It's in your own mind. If you're assuming something to be true in your imagination and you hold to that idea, to that assumption, to that inner agreement, over time, it becomes true by virtue of your attention to it. We've talked about this many times from many different angles. It's a part of what we find here. The initial point of inception is internal. It's like the spark. But when you spark a pile of leaves and then a pile of sticks and you kind of grow and grow this flame, so to speak, it's a part of what we find here. That initial inception begins something, and that process now is going to continue to expand if permitted. Major point here is if permitted.
Right.
You don't need to be concerned that some negative or unhelpful inception is going to become this wildfire of destruction in your life. But similarly, you can't expect for any beautiful point of inception to produce any meaningful change in real life unless those flames have been fanned, unless you've given that some time. And that's where we meet the pathway of anticipation. And we're giving this initial realization more life, more time, more attention, more energy, more love in our own life. If this happens, there comes a point along the way where what has been built up within you connects itself to something, where what was once kind of an intriguing anticipatory movement connects to an awareness. Now, all of that anticipation, which was kind of undirected and amorphous, you knew it was there, it was growing, it was a fire, but what was it trying to do? Finally, it connects to something. You're like, oh, that's what all of this buildup was leading to. At that point of awareness, you have the supernova, and everything that once was explodes into passion. And this is the very thing that will, in fact, transform a life.
Right. At this point of the supernova, you've discovered whatever it is, and it's when your heart and your mind become united and can actually move in the same direction together. That is what passion is.
By definition.
Yeah, that is passion by definition, essentially. It activates that power to move.
The Angel of Truth defines it for us. It refers to passion as crystallized intention. It's the heart and mind committed fully towards any end. If you have it here, we can read some of this verbatim. I think it would be well worth it.
Yep. So right here, we could probably start.
That's going to take some contextualization. How about this? Passion focuses and energizes power. It activates this power towards an end. Passion activates all of you in one direction. Nothing is withheld or portioned off. This is how reunion is embodied. The embodiment of reunion. The angel actually says this is how capital R reunion is embodied. All of self committed towards an end. Right?
And passion is the pathway that permits this.
Passion is the pathway that permits this. So we should use a real life example. We have a few, actually, because we've both lived what this angel came to show us, and it was pretty clear to us early on, like, this angel's talking about, like, our life, our connection even. But a really, I think, relatable example would be the 64 angels themselves.
Right.
Now, each of us has our own version of the same story here. We can kind of take turns sharing if you'd like.
Yeah, I mean, essentially, it's sort of this desire within you, this knowing within you that you want to do something, and you don't know what, but you're on this pathway of anticipation, knowing that there's something coming, you're looking for something, you're following breadcrumbs, and that was very much my experience, especially within the last 5 years, of knowing that I was sort of a spiritual seeker and working with different systems like astrology and human design, and definitely following this pathway of passion, which is the only thing that really moves us when we have this seed within us that knows the truth, and then our mind is kind of like leading us along following these breadcrumbs. That is essentially this pathway of passion. And where it ends up leading to is this supernova moment where you finally discover where all of this is leading you. You're on, a certain trajectory, but you have to trust it.
Yeah. I think what you described is not the pathway of passion, but the pathway of anticipation. Mm-hmm. There's this, again, we mentioned it earlier, you don't know where it's leading.
Right.
All you really have to go on is a basic sense of intrigue and a willingness to follow that.
Yes.
But it hasn't harnessed something fundamental within you yet. It's still on this mostly intellectual level of curiosity.
Yeah.
Like, okay, I know this is meaningful to me, but meaningful to me is not equal to what the angel has described as passion.
Right.
So you're like, there's something here, but I don't know what it is. I'm going to find out what it is. And over the course of time, you continue to learn more about that until at the perfect time, that point of perfect timing, by the way, is not something we have control over. It's something life does for us. The penny drops. And all of a sudden, all of these steps you've made along the way, many of which seem totally disparate and random, all of them congeal into this perfect point of symphonic perfection. And you're like, well, this is it. This is what it's all been about. It's totally inarguable. It's obvious.
Right.
That's when the passion is ignited. The example here is, to make it even less general and more specific, you had your version, my version wasn't all that dissimilar. I quit full-time employment a long time ago to discover something, one, more fulfilling, two, something that involved more of my heart in it, and three, something that felt meaningful, like worthy of my life, my existence. Mm-hmm. I did not know what that looked like. And all along the way, I'm discovering, as you pointed out, new applications of that intent, none of which quite equaled out to what I expected or hoped that they might. Mm-hmm. So it was human design, and it was the full-time study of human design, and it was offering services in that direction. And those services continued to evolve until there were these actual creative, totally original systems coming to life through me, almost like practice for what ultimately would become. But at the time, it was the best I could offer, the best I had experienced. That was the echelon of my experience, and it still wasn't quite there yet when the body keys came through and even the crystal self. These were all points along the way, but none of them had that complete force of like passion, that complete force of knowing that said, I absolutely know that this is what all of that was about, and this is what I'll be spending the rest of my life doing. I can't tell you how I know that, but I know it. That never happened.
Right.
It never happened until we met. And after we met, there was a period of a long stretch of time where we were doing the same thing.
Yep.
Exploring multiple different avenues, enjoying every step along the way, but also aware that we had yet to discover the thing. First of all, to consider that a thing exists is a massive leap for your mind, because we've all been taught to compromise. We've all been taught to just like make do with whatever pays well, or make do with the storyline everyone else is playing out. So to even consider that there is something you're seeking, to enter this pathway of anticipation in and of itself takes a great deal of open-mindedness, of willingness to break through many different comfort zones, and ultimately a willingness to stand apart from the crowd. So we're doing all of this, and it isn't until we discover that the 64 angels exists as a concept that we begin to really like tune in to something. It's like, wait, this is altogether different. This is not yet another version of something we have seen. This is something capital S. And then the angels begin to reveal themselves and their words, and we're involved in this sweep of discovery and work that without question activates passion. Before we even met the liberated tarot, we knew that the 64 angels is what we were going to spend the rest of our lives building, and then life gave us the liberated tarot too. And it was like, boom, all of a sudden, the story leading up until that point for Laura, the story leading up until that point for me, harnessed or connected to the thing it was building up to all along. And where we thought we were fanning flames for hopefully a nice big bonfire, or maybe if we're lucky, a wildfire of interaction and engagement and inspiration and enjoyment and surprise, what we discovered is instead that this was an explosive moment, a supernova moment, and rather than a wildfire, what was being ignited here was a sun. We were on an altogether like inappropriate scale because we couldn't even imagine what was possible at scale.
Right.
So passion is what happens once that supernova moment has occurred, once that penny has dropped, once all of that anticipatory movement lands, finds its home. And now we return to the center of our own story, no longer having to seek out all of these different avenues in order to achieve some version of fulfillment. We arrive again at home, literally in our case. We do all of this from home. It activates the home of our individual hearts and produces everything you're witnessing day after day after day. That is catalysis. That now what you're seeing is an overflow of so much activity that we could never have produced by any other means. And in this context, it costs us nothing. It's an acceleration of a process and costs nothing. It's the most efficient possible application of ourselves. That's catalysis. That's also passion and reunion and the supernova and all these things.
Yeah. Exactly.
It's a long form example, and here's why.
Your
version of it, well, yes, it's a process, but your version of it exists. That's what I'm trying to say. I want you to know this isn't something that played out between last night and this morning. It's not like you have this idea and the light bulb goes off and then your life is transformed necessarily. There is a period of time during which your brain, your ideas, basically, your mind, has to catch up with the knowing of your heart.
Right.
And that's, I think, what the pathway of anticipation produces. I think on this pathway of anticipation, what's happening is the mind is gathering evidence in a particular direction. The heart is already dead clear about everything. There's a version of all this that plays out much more quickly. If our minds had been able to relax into the knowing of the heart sooner, the angels probably would have come through sooner. Totally hypothetical. But essentially what that time gap afforded was the possibility of relaxing into that awareness, of the mind relaxing into the awareness that the heart already held. And that leads us to another major discovery that we've made in this day about what's happening in the heart. That's on you. You discovered it. So go for it. How do you want to begin that?
Well, I mean, essentially what we're talking about here is that everything begins in the heart, and there's that unchanging part of you. If there was a location in your body for where it would be, it's in the heart. It's a heart-centered place that doesn't move, that doesn't change, and it is like this eternal knowing of your truth.
It's a seed.
It's a seed. So, yeah, I mean, I can talk about the metaphor of the Herkimer diamond.
I want you to share what you found in the Herkimer diamond conversation and the way that Herks are created.
Yeah, so powerful. I think the perfect sort of metaphor for this idea of a seed the catalyst essentially that does not change is how a crystal grows. And what's really neat about and it's great because we did not actually make this connection until today, but one of the stone conversations that Timothy had earlier in the year, actually for my birthday, it was on my birthday, I love Herkimer diamonds. The very first thing that these Herkimer diamonds said in this conversation that came through is that they're love seeds. They're light seeds of ages. They kept using this word seed. And at the time I was like, oh, okay, well, actually that's quite unique to Herkimer diamonds themselves. A crystal, the way a crystal grows is it has to basically be anchored to something to grow. But what makes Herkimer diamonds special is they are double terminated, which means they just grow seemingly from nothing. But if you know what a Herkimer diamond is, you know that there's actually a seed at the center of every Herkimer diamond that allows it to grow around that seed and have double terminations.
Yeah. Rather than growing from an anchored beginning, right. They grow around a center.
Right.
And that center is the seed. Mm-hmm. And that's what produces a totally different format in the crystal itself.
Right.
It's part of what makes them so special.
And so what the Herkimer diamonds were essentially communicating to us through this conversation is that we all have this seed at the center of us. They were kind of conveying this perfect metaphor of like their form and how they grow as being just like us, just like humans. Humans also have this seed at the center.
So what's interesting about this is back then when I was meeting with the Herkimer on Laura's behalf, I did not know about this. This was not information I had ever heard before. It wasn't until even just a few weeks ago, maybe even sooner than that, you just randomly told me about the seed at the center of every Herc. And I was like, how's that? So yes, they were speaking about something that both they and you know, but Mr. Guy in the middle, no idea until basically just now. Mm-hmm. It is a perfect metaphor in that every one of us carries this, what they referred to as a star seed, and star seed is a perfect match to the frequency of 63, by the way, at the center of us. This is interesting today in particular because the angel of truth showed up to talk about how the 64 angels live at the center of angelic union, which resides at the center of each one of us. Mm-hmm. This idea of a seed at the center of you, that star seed, is literally the light of truth. Mm-hmm. The angel of truth referred to it as the crystalline center of truth.
Mm-hmm. The crystalline center of you.
The crystalline center of you. These dots may seem kind of random to connect, but they're not random. If you know that everything is exploding outward from an unchanging center, and that the intelligence held at that center point produces everything else that happens, has a catalytic impact on everything else that happens, and ultimately determines the pattern of growth that emerges in the same way that the seed at the center of the Herc determines what that crystal looks like, what form it will take, then what we arrive at is an understanding that each one of us carries this seed of truth within us. That seed of truth is unchanging. It is impervious to damage, and it's telling a story that is entirely your own to live out, that expands outward to become the form of you, the form of your life. Mm-hmm. And these pathways of anticipation and passion are basically just invitations to get the mind out of our own way, to get out of our own way and to permit that intelligence to live itself out through each of us. We do this by committing all of ourselves toward one end, which means unifying the mind and the body, the mind and the heart, to do what they're meant to do, which is express this totally original form, which is you.
Yes. Yeah, so really the only thing that has to mature in this process is our minds. Mm-hmm. Our minds need to open enough to be willing to be flexible enough to be willing to release old beliefs that don't serve that diamond heart that's at the center of us, that knows, you know, what potential is there to be lived, to unfold. Yes. So of course, life is generous and allows that process, allows us to move through it in a way that, we can change our beliefs, and we can do so incrementally, or we can do it very quickly. But either way, that's really what's happening. Our minds are catching up to the heart. And when that happens, you're unstoppable. Everything that is held at the center can then blossom.
That's how you become the embodiment of the supernova. And these words like supernova, they're big words. We're using words like explosive and dynamic. But be aware, we're not exaggerating. That's exactly how it feels. Because when you're chugging along, doing your very best, following these breadcrumbs, but not knowing where they lead, feeling pretty far off out into the weeds, feeling quite alone, feeling totally confused, and frankly, feeling like you might be screwing it up all along the way, like maybe you are a little deluded.
Yeah.
When all of this is going on, and then all of it adds up to something, and you come to that place of being like, I knew it, where you can literally say that because you literally do, and literally always have, that is an explosive moment. That does change everything. And what happens in that moment is any part of you that previously worried, previously doubted, previously withheld itself from what you were doing and what you knew to do, it vaporizes in the light of that awareness. And instantly, all of you arrives to this process. And then everything is changed, because the moment all of you is present, you accelerate, you explode, and what you thought was a wildfire becomes a literal sun. And the light that you thought you were going to be able to produce by keeping this thing alive somehow becomes an inevitable light that's always been held at the center of you. You have this conversation pulled up. I just keep reading this one sentence. It says, every bright soul is a star of its own, indestructible, impenetrable, invulnerable, unshakable, clear as the day, bright and true.
And another frequency match to the 63 of the day is diamond heart.
Diamond heart. That's what it is.
That's the seed.
That's the seed. That diamond heart is an impenetrable truth about you. And everything you encounter or experience or consider that is not equal to that is destined to burn up in the light of that. That's what this catalysis is all about. It's about producing a reaction that ultimately eliminates anything, any obstacle to complete efficiency, any obstacle to complete expression of your truest self.
Right. I mean, we absolutely experience this acceleration of efficient, productive energy since discovering the 64 angels.
Absolutely.
I mean, the amount that we've been able to accomplish in just a few months' time has been quite shocking for both of us to experience. And we are literally just experiencing it. It has not felt like a burden or a drudgery or really hard work. We're just showing up for it.
Nothing else we'd rather be doing. We can't help but show up for it. That's the other thing about passion.
Yes.
The Angel of Truth tells us that passion becomes a motive force. In other words, it motivates us. It moves us. It is an ultimate motive force. There's another word that the angels have used, this word motive power, motive force, to describe, and it's desire. Desire and passion, they are not all that different. In fact, both of them are inner experiences that orient us towards some end. The question is, how much of yourself are you willing to commit towards that end? Because to your point, until the mind commits itself to the awareness of the heart, it doesn't matter how much passion you might feel. If you're not willing to permit that passion to move you, you remain static. You remain inert. That power has yet to crystallize and become something real for you. At best, it's fantasy. At worst, it's deep discomfort, physical dis-ease, as you know that where you are is not where you're meant to be, but your fear or your ideas continue to hold you back because you think you're supposed to be doing this instead, or you think you may not be able to practically kind of accommodate the passions that your heart has been calling you toward. There are any number of ways that our minds get in the way of this very natural, very necessary movement. This process is about aligning the mind with the heart, understanding that the heart's awareness is crystal clear and unchanging from the beginning. Your heart has literally always known and always will know. Your mind has got to get on board with that knowing and stop trying to figure everything out, because the heart's strategy, the heart's intelligence, the heart's logic is not equal to the mind's. It's far superior. So the mind is trying to strategize and build trajectories and charts and graphs and determine, well, if I take this step, then what will I do?
Yeah.
And the heart is like, just put on your seatbelt.
Yeah.
And
Bro,
let's
chill.
go. Yeah, what did you say?
Bro, chill.
Bro, chill. Yeah, strap in, because this is going to be an awesome ride. And I think that's what we see here.
Yes, another frequency match to the day. 63 is the word intelligence, and this is that brain, that intelligence that the heart, has. I even think it might be scientifically proven that the heart.
It's called the heart brain.
Yes, has its own intelligence, and so that's what that's what's actually guiding us.
I really want this conversation to feel as practical for our viewers as it has felt for us. The challenge with making it practical is that the practical expression of this actually demands a heck of a lot of courage and trust and a willingness to break the molds that you've been raised into, frankly. There's no way that we get to avoid this process of break down in order to break open. There's no way that we avoid this process of releasing prior forms in order to inhabit the ideal form. And the angel talks about this too. It says the hero is invited to emerge. But that hero, you, has to step out. You have to step out. There's no way to get this until you choose to experience it for yourself. It moves from the inside out. Go ahead, please.
I was thinking that we might read a couple lines from the Angel of Truth, because honestly, I think this conversation, this session with the Angel of Truth is one of our most practical conversations, because it gives us a perspective that is not common, actually, I think, in the spiritual community.
Yeah. What are you seeing?
So I'm seeing, I'll just read a couple of lines and see where it takes us from there. But there is nothing you encounter that defies you. Every moment shares a memory of you. What you love on purpose to reveal you, no matter what it is that you may love. So this is how we practically move through each moment, realizing that everything that is surrounding us that we encounter in life is actually designed to spark that feeling within our hearts to guide us, to keep us moving. And when we're able to take actions on what we love, that's all we have to keep doing. It's really all we have to keep doing.
Yeah, that's exactly right. That's where it becomes practical. These are large words we're using because the impact, once permitted, is in fact that large. But when the angel says something like, every tendency and preference defines you, what it's saying is that seat at the center of you is altogether different from the one at the center of Laura, and altogether different from the one at the center of me. Yes, they all hold the same principles of truth, but those principles are enacted or lived out in a way that is totally original in every single case.
Right.
At every scale.
Right. That's why there's zero comparison. Comparison cannot even enter the game at all for a moment, because what we love and what we don't love is exactly how we're able to find our way.
Yes.
And each of us is meant to have our way. So another line that I wanted to read was this one, which is, releasing what you don't love clears the way. Releasing sheds distraction from the truth. So having that permission to not only act on what you love, move in that direction, but also release what you don't. Absolutely. Both of those are signaling to you to do the same thing, which is to move in your direction, move on your path.
They're very active invitations. If you do not release what is not meant for you, no one else will. Mm-hmm. That's tough. The level of responsibility inherent to these amazing gifts that the angels have given us, these amazing insights, it is a complete responsibility. There is no greater responsibility. So you are the only one who can proactively choose to release what is not a fit and proactively choose to move toward that which is, even though you don't necessarily understand what that leads to, even if you don't necessarily understand how that will fulfill or support you. What you can know is what you know here. And everyone knows that. Everyone has some awareness of that, even if they've spent their whole life working very hard to silence it. The awareness is there. The question is, what are you doing with that awareness? Our recommendation, based on our experience, is you harness it. You get everything not equal to that out of the way, and you give it full reign, even if only as an experiment. But you do that. You don't consider it. You don't watch videos and think about it or jump on Facebook groups and talk about it. You do that. You follow that, understanding that whatever that looks like for you is totally unique and specific to you. And whatever it is will adapt itself until the penny drops. Yeah. So it's like, oh, I'm interested in numerology. Oh, I'm interested in human design. Oh, I'm interested in Herkimer diamonds. Where is all this leading us? Mm-hmm. If we were to have followed any one of these things to its ultimate end, the answer would have been nowhere. Timothy was never meant to be a human design reader. Laura was never supposed to be a world-class Herkimer diamond collector. These things aren't meant to shoot off into all time and become the thing that we're meant to be. That's too small. What they do is they lead us to what it is we're meant to be doing. All of those apparently random threads led us to one another, its own miraculous story, perfectly equal to the process that we're describing. But it also led us to this point we are sitting in today, this awareness of the angels, this understanding of who they are and what they mean to all of us, and this opportunity to share all of that with you. You will have your version of that. It will play out in a way that is totally unique to you based on what you love. It will not be the 64 angels. It will be something else. But that something else will be yours, and you will know it when you find it. And in the same way that we knew one another when we found one another, and in the same way that we knew the angels when they were revealed to us, you will know the answer, capital A answer, to all of your questions the moment it's time for you to know. That will connect to relationship. You will know your one when you find it, if you haven't already. You will know your career or your work or your contribution, whatever that may be, when it arrives. It will happen in every major dimension of your experience. It's happened in many major dimensions of our experience, but not everyone. There are still major breakthroughs, major supernovas that await us. In many different dimensions of our experience. We're still on the pathway of anticipation, knowing absolutely that there is something coming, but having no true sense of what it might be or when it will arrive. Yeah. That's awesome. We're gathering evidence, and the time will come. Right. And we have enough experience at this point to know that there's zero question as to whether or not the time will come. It's only a matter of when, not if. Right,
because we know that that seed is alive and waiting at the center of us. That's like a promise.
It is a promise. It is a promise. It is a blueprint, another match to the 63. Yep. It is a sun, a star at the center of every one of us. I feel at this point like, again, it's kind of like we're just dancing around something, and we could probably do that all day. It's best maybe at this point to just become silent and to let that seed of awareness continue to grow within us and also our listeners. But a part of me feels frustrated because I really want to find the perfect words that, everyone listening will just get it. Yeah. I don't think it works like that, unfortunately. So before I actually frustrate myself, I want to terminate the conversation because we've said as much as we can say. What's meant to be seen is something you feel. Yeah. It's not something you hear and then agree with mentally. It's something ignited within you.
Yeah. Maybe I can show the Herkimer diamond.
Yeah, do that.
Here we go.
Let's see if it can...
Come on, focus.
It doesn't like to focus on things. I don't know why. Go a little closer. It says...
There it is.
Kind of. I don't know. We're not using like some special camera here. We're just using our cell phone, and it has its own idea about how to do all of this stuff. So that's fine.
But anyway, we really think that this is a great metaphor. And if you have the chance to go read the Stone Conversation,
you got to tell them exactly which one it is.
Yeah, we'll link it, but it is the Herkimer Diamond Trio, which you can find at timothybrainerd.com if you go to Conversations with Stones, and then also definitely the Angel of Truth, which is 63rd Angel.
That's home base for all of this. Frankly, the Angel of Truth has already said everything we are attempting to say.
Right.
But you need to understand that what it said is going to require your attention. You don't read it like you read, Reader's Digest while you're sitting on the toilet. You study it. You have to. You have to give it time. You have to pore over every sentence, and you have to really uncover what it means. And then you have to connect that to yourself. So this is why I don't say read the sessions over and over again. I'm like, you have to literally study these sessions. If you do this, you will receive what you're meant to receive. I love those cases where that crystal clear expression comes through us totally unexpectedly. I am getting the sense that what's meant for you has already been delivered in that format. And it's not going to come from Timothy's brilliance or way with words. It's going to come from what the angel has already given to us in explicit form. So that's where we turn our attention to. We follow breadcrumbs from there. And we know absolutely that there is a seed of intelligence within all of us guiding us to that penny drop, guiding us to that moment where everything comes together and we get to live out a whole new story on the other side of that. So hopefully this was helpful in some way. Again, I'm like, this doesn't feel like something I even want to share because I'm like so close but not there. We're going to have to trust that it's correct for now. And thank you for listening to our attempts, for putting up with this and bearing with us as always, but most of all for your presence. That's what means the most. We'll see you again tomorrow.
Yes.
Yeah. Okay.
Bye.
Goodbye for now.